Let's get more now on the challenges Lai is facing on the domestic front. Lawmakers are back in the legislature to vote on controversial reforms that have split the country. Rick Glauert is at the legislature in central Taipei for us. Rick, are we seeing a repeat of the dramatic scene that unfolded on Tuesday?
Well, yes, is the short answer. It's been another rowdy day here at Taiwan's legislature. We've seen lawmakers shouting at one another, chanting slogans and waving their flags and banners. That's all as the two main opposition parties push through reforms that they say will give this legislature more power to hold the government and others to account. Those opposing those reforms, of course, saying that this is the death of democracy and could even pose a risk to national security. But with their majority, those opposition parties have been voting on the clauses. They voted on one that would require the president to come to Parliament and answer questions, and another that would criminalize lying to the legislature. So this, with China's military drills around Taiwan, are adding to quite a challenging start to Lai Ching-te's presidency.
A display of its disapproval. China sends military ships to surround Taiwan just days after the island nation inaugurated a new leader. Beijing claims sovereignty over the self-ruled country and sees its new president as a dangerous separatist for espousing Taiwanese democracy. These drills, Beijing says, a punishment for Lai's inauguration speech.
我们也要向世界宣告，民主自由是台湾不可退让的坚持。 和平是唯一的选项，繁荣是长治久安的目标。
Despite winning the presidency for his Democratic Progressive Party, or the DPP, Lai now faces a hostile legislature in the hands of more China-leaning opposition parties. They took their seats weeks before Lai's inauguration and have been rushing through controversial reforms that would allow Parliament to investigate government officials and citizens, which leaders of main opposition party, the Kuomintang or KMT, say will bring greater accountability.
What we want to achieve is to, as I said, to consolidate and refine our democratic system. So we wanted to say a better check and balance, a more balanced executive versus legislative power.
Disputes in the chamber have descended into violence. Lai's ruling DPP accuses the opposition of stifling debate and not following parliamentary procedures, and say the reforms could make Taiwan more vulnerable to Chinese aggression.
All these pro-China legislators who visit China pretty often, they could initiate this kind of investigation and putting some sort of pressure on people who dislike China. So that's why I think the democracy might break with this bill.
Public opinion is also split. There have been large street protests supporting both sides of the legislature. And the Chinese military drills, continuing for a second day, have put this sensitive region on edge.
Lai has a very difficult task, but the first year I'd expect him to be very severely tested. And I guess what he needs to do is to show both people in Taiwan and also the world that he's able to handle stress, that he's not going to crack under pressure.
Lai is sticking to his guns and refusing to flinch in the face of Chinese aggression. He's promised to push ahead with bolstering national defence, putting Taiwan's resolve on display. But with his leadership facing challenges both at home and abroad, less than a week into the job, this new president is already having to prove his mettle. Kris and Rick Glauert for TaiwanPlus.
With all the objections and squabbling, this session looks like it's going to continue throughout the day and even well into the night. And voting on all of the clauses is unlikely to finish until next week. Meanwhile, protests are ongoing outside of the parliament. They're likely to swell later. So as China demonstrates the external threat to the country, internally we're seeing a very politically divided Taiwan.